Ivy and Bean Take Care of the Babysitter. Written by Annie Barrows. Illustrated by Sophie Blackhall. The Special Experiment. "What do you want?" Bean said to her mother. "Excuse me?" said her mother. That meant that Bean had been rude and she'd better shape up quick. "Sorry. What?" "Well," her mother smiled brightly, "today we're going to try a special experiment, and I want you to be on your best behavior." Best behavior? It was Saturday. Bean looked carefully at her mother. She was wearing lipstick. "Where are you going?" Bean asked. "Daddy and I are going to a play. Can I come?" Bean always asked that, even if she didn't really want to go. "No, it's for grown-ups," said her mom. "Is Leona babysitting?" Bean liked Leona. She had long black hair, and she could draw perfect horses. "No," Bean's mom sighed. "Leona has poison oak. That's the reason for the special experiment." Bean wasn't liking the sound of this. Grown-ups used the word special when they really meant weird. "Did you know that I was 11 years old when I started babysitting?" her mom asked. "No." Uh-oh. Was she about to get a new babysitter? "Well, I was," her mother went on. "And now that Nancy's 11, we've decided to let her take care of you for the afternoon." "What?" yelped Bean. "Nancy was her new babysitter?" "And you'll behave just like you'd behave for any other babysitter," said her father, popping into the room. His hair was wet. "Which means nicely," said her mother, calmly. "You're going to let Nancy babysit me?" yelled Bean. "She'll kill me." "She won't kill you." "She'll tie me up and stuff me in the attic," hollered Bean. "She's not going to tie you up and stuff you in the attic," said her father. "We don't have an attic," said her mother. "We have a crawl space." "She won't give me anything to eat. I'll starve." Bean couldn't stop yelling. "We're only going to be gone a few hours. We'll be home for dinner. You won't starve," said her father. Bean looked from her mom to her dad. They looked back at her. They had already decided, and they weren't going to change their minds. They were really going to leave her with Nancy. Bean had no choice. "Can I go back to Sophie's at least?" she asked. "No," said her mom. "That's the other thing, honey. We want you to stay at home this afternoon, inside the house where Nancy can keep an eye on you, just to be on the safe side." This was getting worse and worse. Bean pressed her hands against her cheeks and rolled her eyes back in her head. She opened her mouth as wide as it would go. "Bean, stop that," said her mother. Bean stopped it. "Mom," she said, trying to sound calm and nice, "do you realize that we built a volcano in Sophie W.'s yard? Do you realize that everybody in the whole entire world is down there except me, and it's erupting, and it was my idea?" "You can call Ivy and ask her to come over if you want," said her mother. "No, I can't, because she's playing at Sophie's," said Bean grumpily, "along with everybody else in the whole entire world." "I'm sorry, honey. It's just for one afternoon." Her mother felt bad. Bean could tell. Her dad didn't. "You'll live," he said. Bean collapsed onto the rug. "I'm doomed," she moaned. "I'm double doomed." "Hey, Beanie," said Nancy, bouncing into the living room. "Did you hear the news? We're going to have a great time. I'll even play Crazy Eights if you want." Bean looked up at Nancy with narrow eyes. She was faking. The minute their parents left, Nancy was going to start being the meanest babysitter in the world. "Okay," said her dad, slapping his hands together. "Great, crazy ace. Let's get going, Char. Can't be late." Her mom bent down and patted Bean's cheek. "We'll be back in no time, sweetie." Bean closed her eyes. She hoped she looked like a poor little thing. "Take good care of your little sister, Nancy," said her mom. "No worries," Nancy sang. "Have a great time." There was the sound of her mother putting on a sweater. There was the sound of the door closing. They were gone. Triple doomed, thought Bean. Bean opened her eyes. Nancy was standing in the doorway. She had her hair up in a bouncy ponytail. She was smiling, with lots of teeth, like a camp counselor. "Do you want to play cards?" she said in a peppy voice. "No," said Bean. "Why are you so happy?" Nancy's smile got even bigger. "Because I'm getting $20 for this." "Who's in charge?" "I'm the one who should get $20, Bean said. It was about the 5th time she had said it. "Putting up with you, teaching you how to be a babysitter. God." "Don't say God," Nancy said. She was reading a magazine. "You're not in charge of me," Bean huffed. "Actually, I am," Nancy said. But she didn't say it in a mean way. Bean had been trying to make Nancy mad ever since their parents left. But she hadn't been able to. Nancy was being mature. It was driving Bean bonkers. Bean rolled over and breathed into the rug. She might smother. If she smothered, her parents would feel really bad. Bean picked some rug fuzz out of her mouth. She knew she wasn't going to smother. She also knew that Nancy wasn't going to tie her up and stuff her in the attic. Neither of those things was the problem. The problem was Nancy being her babysitter. That meant that Nancy was the grown-up, the one who got to decide everything. And it meant that Bean was the little, boring, poopy baby who didn't get to decide anything. Bean couldn't stand it anymore. She got up. "Where are you going?" asked Nancy, looking over her magazine. "You're not supposed to go out." "What is this, jail?" huffed Bean. "I'm not a criminal, you know. I can go in the front yard." "If you do, I'll tell, and you'll get grounded for a week," said Nancy calmly. Bean pressed her hands against her cheeks, rolled her eyes back in her head, and opened her mouth as wide as it would go. But Nancy wasn't even looking. Bean stomped up the stairs as loudly as she could. Nancy didn't say anything. Bean slammed the door to her room. She waited. Nothing. Stupid Nancy. She flung herself down on her bed. She was a prisoner in her own home, treated like a criminal by her own flesh and blood. "By my own flesh and blood," muttered Bean. It sounded good. After a few minutes, she stopped being mad and started being bored. She looked around her room for something to do. She could knit, except that she liked the idea of knitting more than she liked knitting in real life. Besides, her yarn was in a big knot. She thought about painting, but her watercolors were all the way downstairs. She could make a pot holder, but she had already made about 30 of them, and the only colors left were brown and gray. Bean's grandmother loved everything she made, but Bean didn't think even her grandmother would want a brown and gray pot holder. Bean flopped into her basket chair. Ouch. She got up and looked out her window. She had never been so bored in her life. She squeezed all the way to the edge of the window and found out that she could see Sophie W's yard. The mound of dirt was smaller than it had been in the beginning. There was muddy water running down the driveway and into the street. Bean pressed her eyebrow against the glass. Sophie S. had the hose. She was shooting water straight into the sky. Ivy was off to one side, hunched over a pile of rocks. Bean frowned. Some friend. She should sense that Bean was in trouble. She should feel it in her bones. Ivy picked up her rock and splattered it down in the mud. Bean squinted and saw that Ivy's lips were moving. She was talking to herself. For some reason, that made Bean feel better. Ivy wasn't really having a great time with the other kids. Ivy was just playing by herself. In fact, Ivy was probably missing her right this minute. Bean tapped her fingers against the window, thinking. Ivy would come to her rescue if she knew that Bean was imprisoned. Bean was sure of it. Somehow, Bean had to let Ivy know what was going on. Then Ivy could help her escape. Hey, wait a minute. Bean felt an idea landing in her brain like an airplane. An escape. She was in jail, but maybe she could escape. She had heard of prisoners digging tunnels under their jail cells. Too bad her room was upstairs. If she dug a tunnel, she'd fall right into the kitchen. Then she looked at the window. That would work. Bean pictured herself climbing out the window on a rope ladder. She pictured Ivy hiding in the bushes below, waiting to help Bean to freedom. A rope ladder. A daring escape. Cool.